In today's brief video, I want to take a moment and share with you guys what it is that makes vaping so dangerous. And I promise you this video has nothing to do with your breathing, popcorn lung, Chinese chemicals, nothing like that. It's going to have everything to do though with the impact of nicotine on brain development and how your brain functions. Now, if you wind up enjoying the content in today's video, be sure to check out the pinned comment or the video description to download our free 7-step guide on how to quit vaping or how to quit using nicotine products today. It's an immediate download, completely free. One of the major issues with vaping is the quantities of nicotine that a person is consuming over a very short and frequent duration of time. Every time you consume nicotine, nicotine releases dopamine. I think it's something about 150 to 200% more dopamine than your baseline activity. So you wake up, roll over in bed, first thing you're going to do if you're anything like me is hit your vape, and you're going to get that dopamine rush. Now, there's a major problem with that. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter in our brain that's responsible for drive, motivation, and the willingness to repeat behaviors over and over again. Dopamine is arguably the neurotransmitter that has put humans on the top of our food chain. It's what is largely responsible for our existence today. Nicotine addiction hijacks this dopamine pathway. It hijacks this reward pathway in our brain. Dopamine that is acquired without effort is very, very, very dangerous. Because now your brain, which only understands dopamine in terms of zeros and ones, says, hey, I know a really easy activity that can get me a lot of dopamine. And your brain quickly is trained to repeat that behavior over and over and over and over again. Now, at the same time your brain is starting to repeat that behavior, vaping or consuming nicotine repeatedly, it's quickly forgetting or quickly neglecting all the other things in our lives that could bring us dopamine. This has to do with exercise. This has to do with completing a challenging task. This has to do with studying for an exam and celebrating the reward of getting a good grade. This could be the pursuit of a significant other, right? A male, a female. This could be any number of tasks or efforts that we have to partake in order to get that dopamine, in order to get that feeling of satisfaction and reward. Nicotine addiction in general, irrelevant of whether it's a vape, a chewing tobacco, a cigarette, whatever it is, hijacks and messes with this pathway. Once our brain starts to see nicotine as a primary source of dopamine, it starts to lose interest in other sources of dopamine, but at the same time, it gets even worse. Because the more you abuse a substance that releases excessive amounts of dopamine on demand, right? Cheap, fast dopamine, what happens is your brain says, wait a minute, I have too much dopamine. I've been flooded with dopamine. And it actually starts to down-regulate the production of dopamine and its responsiveness to dopamine. And this is where no matter what the addiction is, no matter what the drug is, whether it's nicotine, weed, cocaine, heroin, it doesn't matter. Eventually, over time, this individual starts to become very, very demotivated because they're operating in a state of 24/7 dopamine deficit. Now, what could this look like in nicotine addiction? It's pretty obvious in maybe weed addiction or heroin addiction what that looks like. This is the individual, and I was this person, okay, who can't check their emails without nicotine. You can't wake up in the morning without nicotine. You can't go into that business meeting without nicotine. You can't have fun with your family or your friends without nicotine. You can't enjoy doing anything without nicotine. And in fact, if you're anything like me, you wind up getting like almost scared or anxious at even the thought of having to do something without nicotine. Especially if it's like a work-related task or a studying-related task. Because if you've tied that addiction to those tasks, now you need nicotine, you've become dependent on it for the little flicker of dopamine release just to start to pursue those basic activities. And this is where nicotine addiction and where vaping becomes so dangerous. When they look at characteristics of highly successful people, one of the things that they see across the board is delayed gratification. The ability to put off A, or work really hard at A, even if it takes a long time, in order to get the reward of B, okay? And nicotine addiction damages this area in the brain because our brain has now been trained to want that instant hit of dopamine. I want it, and I want it now, and I want it without effort. Now, the next time that you face a challenging task, you either A, have to consume nicotine constantly in order to get through that task, or B, you simply don't have the motivation and the tools naturally anymore, the dopamine production, to even embark on that endeavor, that challenge. And this is one of the things that makes nicotine addiction so dangerous. A lot of people will say, well, Dr. Frank, that's not true. There's a lot of successful people who use nicotine, and there might be, but some of those successful people, they are dependent on the 24-hour around-the-clock consumption of nicotine. Now, for some people, they may not care. But I know for me personally, once the health side effects started to catch up, once the financial side effects started to catch up, and once I was in a position where I simply didn't want to be using nicotine anymore, this became much more of a burden than it did a benefit. And, you know, that's obviously when I started to think about quitting. Now, a lot of what I talk about, Dr. Andrew Huberman has a longer podcast on this where he talks about the importance of dopamine with reward and how dopamine should be derived from the effort of the challenge, not so much from these quick hits of rewards throughout the day. And I've linked that podcast in the video description, along with some of his YouTube short videos for those of you who don't want to consume the full, 2-hour ensemble of Dr. Huberman's excellently valuable information. Now, I will say this, because some people are going to complain maybe, why did I have him in the thumbnail? When it comes to nicotine, Dr. Huberman talks about nicotine as being really, really good for brain function. And he says, it prevents the breakdown of acetylcholine, it helps with focus, and it does do all of those things. But there's a major problem. If you have a nicotine addiction, a nicotine substance use disorder, if you're consuming massive amounts of it and you're not in the small minority of people who are microdosing it or using it truly as a nootropic, you're actually causing more damage long-term to brain function and that reward circuitry. You're also using something that's a pretty powerful vasoconstrictant. So you're not only reducing blood flow to other parts of your body like your, down there and your bones and your muscles, but you're also reducing blood flow to your brain over time, which is accepted as a not good thing when it comes to brain health and overall functioning. So that's why I threw him in the thumbnail, because he talks about the benefits of nicotine, but then he talks about how dopamine can be so damaging and how when that system is hijacked, it leads to these addictive behaviors. But in that episode, I don't know if he really tied the two together, and I think a lot of people have cut up his shorts where he talks positively about nicotine, and they've put this spin on it that I don't think he would approve of. So that's why I threw him in the thumbnail, just to kind of clear up nicotine, the benefits, how it works, the dangers of it, all that fun stuff. Now, if you need help quitting, here at Addiction Mindset Recovery Coaching, we offer one-on-one paid addiction consulting programs. We offer group coaching, and then we have a ton of free information out there. So if you would like this video, either check out our paid stuff or download that free 7-step guide to quitting nicotine today. It's an immediate download. It puts you right on my email list where I send out helpful emails reiterating our video topics just like this. It's a great way to stay in touch. All right, guys, until next time.